Jesus, that's bright. Torches of the damned. Better. Hoses. Holy Moses hoses. Well, we got hoses everywhere. We got it. Welcome back to Hopper's Hot Rods, House of Hoses. We've got fuel hose to tie up, dipstick tube, oil dipstick tube, transmission dipstick tube, oil fill tube, tubes. Because it's a van, we got to figure out where we're going to put all those and how we're going to make them work. So let's spend way too much time on checking fluids and getting fluids into the engine. Okay, this is going to be one of the last parts of finalizing this fuel system, and that's dealing with this bit of slack that's hanging down. It's the return line, and I don't want to cut it. I'm just going to make a service loop and find a way to attach it to the floor here, and zip tie the supply line and just clean these up before moving on to the last details of the transmission, which will be these, connecting these lines here to these two line input and outputs there. Nope, I don't like it. Nope. We're going to do something different. Well, I tried a few different types of clamps and didn't get anywhere with those. So I'm going to do the old standby zip tie technique, and there's really nothing wrong with the zip tie technique. I even checked my plumbing stuff because this is about the same size as PEX pipe, like the smaller PEX pipe, and I use that sometimes for plumbing, and I thought, ooh, I bet I have some clamps, but they're in a different box somewhere. So we are going to get the fuel system wrapped up with zip ties and move on. All right, let's get to work here. We've got to put the transmission cooling lines from here to here, and the first thing I'm going to do is clear the old fluid out of the transmission cooler. I feel like I let most of it drain out when I took the transmission out, but we're going to make sure we don't have any leftover old fluid with old contaminants. I just stick one hose in a container, and then I'm going to blow through the cooler with a little compressed air and make sure it's clear. I've never installed one of these. That might be obvious right now. Well, that one's in now. Okay, got my little tubing cutter. We're gonna figure out where to put this little section of hose to connect the new transmission lines to the old transmission lines. And I think this will be fine. This little tubing cutter is very easy to use. You put a little bit of tension on this wheel, spin it around, a little more tension, spin it around the tube, just a hair more, spin it around, just a hair more, spin it around. And this is the kind of little detailed thing they don't often show on the hot rod programs because, you know, they're pressed for time, but this is the real part about making something work, making something, you know, last, making something that you can enjoy driving. Every detail is equally important as every other detail, really. you know, the big moments like, ooh, turning the key, or, you know, getting the engine set in for the first time. Well, that's great, that's wonderful, but if you don't do this part, then that part is not going to happen. Let's see, I'm just going to cut about this much off this line and put some clamps on it. Okay, you can probably see it a little bit better now. Here's where the old transmission lines meet up with the new ones, and the new ones nicely tucked in and attached. Okay, so on the engine in the salvage yard, this weird big bracket was bolted in on the front of that head right there, and as you can see, this is in the way, and then the bracket held the transmission dipstick tube, the oil dipstick tube, and the oil fill tube, which the oil fill is there. As you can see, it'd be pretty hard to get a, you know, oil. It isn't going to work. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's not going to work that way. So, how am I going to solve this puzzle? How am I going to figure out right about where this actually went and take some measurements without starting to hack on it? Here's my plan. I'll show you. Okay, I've got an engine head here I'm going to use to mock up where the bracket went, you know, in the salvage yard. Which way did this thing go here? Bound to come in handy some way. This, I guess. And then there was one of these like this here. And then this one here, which held, yeah, that's where the oil fill tube was going to go, so that bolts right there. See, I can mock all this up. I'll take some measurements, and I'll probably just have to make a new bracket to weld to this that will clear the air conditioning compressor. So let me run these bolts down in a second. We'll grab some tools. Fortunately, I've been compiling parts to build another LS engine for another project. Okay, now you can see how this thing looks in sort of supported in three-dimensional space here. Fortunately, I had a that's what I use for holding the camera usually. It's kind of a weird big bracket that seems like it could be much simpler. That's going to hold the transmission dipstick tube and the oil dipstick tube in place. So I just need to figure out a way to where I'm going to cut this and make a bracket that connects just out of, you know, steel beam in case I needed it for something. So I'm just going to take my cutoff here, slice it along here, slice it here, then it'll have this little bit of a C shape to it. I'll show you. Okay, I'm going to measure from the bolt hole on the head, which you cannot see, to the top of the AC compressor, which you can see, and because the bracket I'm going to make to hold, to hold this in place, which is holding you in place, I want to make sure it clears the AC compressor, but I also want it to be fairly close to the AC compressor. And I measure with these calipers, and I'll tell you why, is because I'm a perfectionist and everything I do comes out great. No, not really. The truth is, I can just put these in the right spot, which is getting close right there from the middle, a little bit more. I can stick these in here and get a measurement of pretty much, I know if it's at the top of the bolt that it'll clear the AC compressor. Now, the reason I use these things instead of a tape measure sometimes is I don't even have to read this. I can just leave this like this, and I can kind of lock it in place, and then use it to make my bracket and not have to adjust it at all. Not that much. This is the metal that I cut off that little piece of beam, and I'm just going to bolt them in place right here, one-handed for your entertainment. You know what? That's enough of your entertainment. Let me set up. So my idea is this. I've got both of these pieces of metal. Since I don't have anything like a bead roller or a, you know, what do they call it, a box and pan brake to bend sheet metal and stuff like that, I cut this out of the thing, but I left that bend and a little bit of that bend, which adds tons of strength to it. And it's a fairly thicker gauge piece of steel. So now I can take that measurement that I just took under the hood. See, I don't have to get the tape measure and go, oh wait, was it 1 18/64? I can just do this. I can go here, that's about where it is. I know that if I put my next piece across there, then I should be in pretty good shape. And the piece I plan to use, because I just barely want to have something covering the AC compressor, is I can use a chunk of this and probably weld it right there across the top, and made a mark on both of these where I'm going to cut them, and then decided to notch out here because it's tight. I want to be able to get a wrench onto these, and then I'm going to notch this so I can get a wrench onto that one. I'm also notching this so I'll have clearance for the bolt to go on, and I may end up having to put a washer behind this, and then so cut, grind, tack weld, test fit on the engine, then we'll determine where to cut this and how we want to attach it to our new bracket. Moving along. Well, let's see if we can go ahead and pre-assemble this thing, hopefully for the last time before we tack weld it and test fit it on the engine. Then all that will be left is cutting the other bracket and attaching it to this bracket, and I want to make sure I can nut and bolt it so that you don't have to take this off anytime you want to remove the dipstick tube and stuff. There's no reason it needs to be hard to remove. The reason I'm using a level, I went ahead and took an angle finder and figured out the angle that the head set on the engine in the engine compartment and matched it up here. So when I make this bracket level, it'll be level in there because that's the way the other one was designed, is to sort of sit level. And I just didn't want it putting anything in a bind when I tried to tighten it up. So I tried to make it, more or less level. Again, we're going to tack weld it so it will be tweakable, if that's a word. All right. Hey, that's not bad. It's not level, but it's not bad. Where's the thing? Okay. I went ahead and ground off all this red don't know if it's paint or powder coating, but I went and got rid of it. So now this guy will sit here. I can access this bolt, and I can access this bolt, and I can do it from the side. That's why I cut this little, trimmed away some of that channel, because it's behind the AC compressor. I need to be able to get a wrench in, you know, that way. So now all you have to do is, adjust these clamps. And I can throw this thing in here. Well, I just need to move it a tiny bit. Thank you. Now, I see no reason we couldn't just tack weld this and test it on the engine, then come back and do the snip to the old original one here. Let's give it a try. We're going to let that cool off for just a minute, and we'll test it out on the engine. All right, changing the design on the fly here. I can get a bolt on the, a wrench on the bolt, and I can get the bolt started in the head, but it was really, really tricky to try to do that with the bracket in place. You can see where it is. So I'm just going to, I put the bolt in most of the way, and now I'm going to, this is this one, just take a cutoff wheel and notch this so this will slide down onto an almost tightened bolt, and then you just have to tighten it. The other one, I think I can just get it started, but this one will be a slip in place. There, you'll see. I've been whittling away at this mount for a few minutes now, and tack welded in place with my horrible welding skills, but it slides onto the bolts, and I already have the other short bolts mounted on the head in the vehicle, so we can test fit everything in a bit. So the whole point of trying to do it this way is to have this flat surface, for this flat surface to bolt to or weld to. And so now all that's left is to really tape measure. Maybe I'll give a caliper. I will measure the difference between this mounting surface underneath and the center of this bolt. Then I'll measure the top of this mounting surface and the center of this bolt, and the difference will be how much I need to remove from this vertical upright. Then I just need to index it properly on this, on the other, left, right here, and yeah. So after I considered this puzzle for probably a little bit too long, I remembered that somebody once observed that I overthink things a little bit. And so I spent 37.5 minutes contemplating whether or not I was overthinking this problem. And I came to the conclusion that I probably was. So I'm just going to slice this thing off 1 3/4 inches above this mounting surface. Weld the bracket, or bolt the bracket into the van, clamp this in place, overlap this to this until everything lines up, and weld it. I think that's going to be okay. Here's a little behind the scenes for you. This is my phone mount. It's a lumber clamp with some vice grips that I try to put in different places. I use this ridiculous thing for you. Okay, let's see if we can test fit our highly over elaborate bracket. How about I lower the van about 2 feet? Try that again. Okay, now it's down into a range where a person can probably reach it. I sit behind one bolt, and I sit behind the other bolt, and it clears the AC bracket, AC compressor just nice. And then we can, we have some adjustability, with these, we can actually slide it up and down a little bit, and we'll move everything around till it all lines up really nice with the fill tube, clamp it, mark it, grind it, clean it, weld it, grind it, paint it, install it. Took me a minute to find these vice grips, and I'm reminded of what a friend of mine once told me. Yes, I have friends, such as they are. And he said, if you can't find something, just stop what the hell you're doing. Stop it. Stop it completely and start cleaning. And even if it takes you an hour of cleaning, what's the downside? Your whole area is nice and clean, and then at least you know that whatever you lost is really lost, not just kind of lost. I think that's going to be fine right there. There we are. That's hopefully a mark that even I can see. I can't even tell if you can see any of this. There. I still can't tell if you can see any of it. Whatever. Anyhow, you get the basic idea. Everything is clamped in place. There. Bouncing around. Never mind. Forget that. All right. So I ground off all the paint. So now it's just a matter of making sure it's sitting just like I want it. A little bit of angle like that wouldn't kill me, but I think that's really pretty good right there. So I think that's good. Yep. All right. I think we tack welded in place. Like, I think we hit it with a quick weld right here. Time for fit and finish. It more or less fits, so it's finished. Now it's a professional job. Look at that. It went from metal butcher to fabricator in 2 seconds. Look at that. It's as though we had a clue. Not really. Well, here's our bracket. A little over-engineered probably, but I mean, it rides on the engine with a lot of vibration for hopefully years. So it needed to be in this configuration, but a little bit higher. So we made it to where it can slip down onto a couple of bolts that are already in the head behind that AC compressor. Like so. We've got gaps here so that a wrench can fit behind the AC compressor. We've got, you know, fairly smoothed off there. And then then we cut down the tube thing that, you know, used to be about 1.75 inches high off that, and it now sits like that with a nut that holds it in place. And there we are. That's how it's going to sit on the engine. Well, there we go. It took a couple hours, but it came out nice. It's all factory looking. Now I can very easily service the oil and the transmission fluid. And there's the fill tube right there. Piece of cake. Job done. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. This thing sticks out too far. We can't close the hood. That's fine. That's perfect. Son of a... Well, that was action-packed. I told you, it's tedious, but if you want to do this top-notch build, the guy who drives this is particular and he wants it to be just right, you know, so customers, what are you going to do? Anyway, thank you for visiting Hopper's Hot Rods. The next video, we're going to deal with voltage, gauges of wire, computer programming, timing, editing, exhaust system, rear end, suspension. I'm just kidding. Just probably electrical. Try to get the engine harness on and power to the things that need power. Spark plugs, fuel pumps. Also, if anybody knows anything about electrical systems, I could probably use some help with it because I've been kind of putting it off. I don't know anything about electricity. I think it goes in pounds or inches. I can't remember.